Now, it's the Lee Stone Show on BBC GMR, and broadcasting across Manchester, there are several pretty obvious examples of areas in the world where sport and business seem to merge pretty successfully. Old Trafford, just up the road, being a very good example. Sometimes, though, fans will say, oh, we don't like that, we'd rather keep them separate. However, my next guest is pleased to see how they interact, because he believes that the world of business can learn a great deal from the world of sport when it comes to excellence. He's written a book called Peak Performance. He's Clive Gilson, and he joins me this afternoon. Clive, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
It is nice to talk to you. In a nutshell, that's it, isn't it? Kind of looking at how the sporting world can influence the business world, can show us how we can strive for excellence.
I think that's certainly part of it. The journey that we've been on in writing this book, Peak Performance, has gone on for 3 years. The book has just come out now. When we started out, we frankly didn't know what to find. The reason why we started out is that we were interested in finding a better model for business. We looked at the current offerings, and we're not particularly impressed with them, and our MBA students at the University of Waikato Management School in New Zealand weren't impressed with them either. And so what we wanted to do was to try and find a better model for what we now call sustained peak performance. One of our authors is Kevin Roberts, who's the worldwide CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi, and he was moving into that role at the point where Saatchi & Saatchi had some difficulties with the brothers who'd left and set up M&C Saatchi. And we felt that in order to get a better business model, why not look at sport organization, not just the teams. The teams obviously are very evocative and you get a lot of inspiration out of that. But we argued, a priori reasoning as it were, we argued that if you were going to look at any industry rather, that demonstrated sustained competitive advantage against other people, you'd have to look at sport organization, that the razor-sharp competition on the field would be reflected in organizational practices. And so when we went through that thinking process, we said, well, why not look at the top sport organizations and see what lessons we can learn from them? So yes, ultimately, although it wasn't originally what we intended, but ultimately the theory that we devised, we call it PPO theory, peak performing organization theory, clearly is designed to help corporates develop what we now call sustained peak performance. So that is indeed one of the takeaways from the book.
Sustenance is the important thing, as you mentioned there. Sustaining that performance is every businessman's dream, isn't it? And you mentioned very importantly, if you like, what we see on the football field, on the hockey field, you know, in a race, whatever it happens to be, that inspiration. Was that one of the things that you found as very important, the inspiration of the product in terms of, you know, pushing everyone forward?
Most certainly. I think inspiration in and of itself, you could probably find it in most sport organizations. We certainly found it in abundance in those organizations which had sustained their peak performance over, in some cases, many decades. If you take the All Blacks, they have a 72% win record over 100 years. And take Sean Fitzpatrick, great player, but he wasn't playing at the turn of the century, so you can't say that it's always the players. The players come and go. It has to be the organizational footprint, and part of that footprint undoubtedly is inspiration, alongside a number of other peak practices that we've identified.
How important are those? You mentioned that, you know, that no one person will be the success of a company, of a team, whatever it happens to be. But how important are those individuals? I mean, we hear, obviously, with contract wranglings and stuff at Manchester United, as an example, we hear again and again Alex Ferguson saying, you know, that the team is the most important thing. Is that usually the case in business as well? Or are there moments where an individual, I'm just talking about Saatchi & Saatchi, you know, will have a big influence on a company?
That can happen. What we find is that all of our organizations, the sport organizations, and we also used the theory, or we illustrated the theory by reference to Procter & Gamble, a consummate corporate performer. And all of them have inspirational dreams. They don't, incidentally, have vision statements and mission statements where snowflakes from up on high melt by the time they hit the ground. They do have inspirational dreams, which usually begin with key people. If you take Williams Formula One, one of my favourite organisations, clearly Sir Frank Williams and Patrick Head, the technical director, were instrumental in developing the dream of, as they say, we're all racers here. And they hire to that. No one in the Williams organisation is going to be in the organisation long if they don't have high octane running through their blood. But once the organization gets set on its course, that inspiration is transmitted to other people. And throughout all the PPOs, as we call them, what you can find is a number of inspirational players. And incidentally, we use the phrase players because we don't like the phrase leadership, because in all our research in these sport organizations, we didn't actually find any followers. If you don't have followers, you actually don't have leaders. So for us, leaders is the wrong phrase, is the wrong metaphor. So we talk about inspirational players, and when it moves from the key inspirational player who starts the dream, starts the organization on its path, then others take on the mantle of responsibility, and you can find them throughout the organization.
Did you find that companies which we think of, or countries rather, which we think of as being particularly successful in the business world, as sporting particularly successful teams on the sports field? I mean, you looked at a lot of American teams. You did the Chicago Bulls and the San Francisco 49ers, teams like that, the Atlanta Braves. Did you find that their kind of setup was different to what we might find in, say, Australia, where you looked at netball and hockey?
It's a very interesting question. When we set out on this particular odyssey, we had no idea what we were going to find in terms of commonality. We didn't know whether the kinds of practices that we were going to see would be the same across different countries, cultures and codes. Indeed, we did find similarities. If you read through the chapters, which are written in a very storytelling way, it can be read by anybody, and we pull the theory together at the back end for those who want it. But as you read through the chapters, the commonalities between the chapters are very, very striking. So whether you're talking with Women's Hockey Australia, which is an outstanding organisation, or Bayern Munich, you find very, very similar ways of operating, very similar management principles, and that's what we call PPO theory.
Did you find, because obviously there comes a point, if you're looking for a model, there comes a point where you have to throw a lot of the bathwater out, if you like. Did there come a point where you thought, well, there are certain things which happen in the world of sport which we just can't, and it's not proper to translate into business terms?
Not at all. In fact, in many ways, the fact that we're looking at the organisation, sometimes you can almost forget that they're sport organizations. If you take the Atlanta Braves, they've got 2,000 people working for them. They're part of Time Warner. They're every bit of business as much as an electronics organization or even smokestack industry. We often say we could have been doing butchers, bakers, or candlestick makers. It doesn't matter. They are business organizations. And I think most important of all is that in the book we've been able to illustrate how PPO theory applies to, as I said, Procter & Gamble, who have global revenues of $37 billion. And beyond that, Kevin Roberts, who is a co-author, he has been working with PPO theory rather, for the last 2 to 3 years since he joined the organization. And they have quadrupled their share price and were announced last year in the ad agency world as the international business champions in terms of new business, 40% higher than the next. So we believe that the theories that we've developed from the practices of the top sport organizations does absolutely fundamentally apply to the corporate world.
You describe this as an odyssey, and I suppose when we're talking about application, we go from the world of sport, you apply that to the world of business. Has there come a point after 3 years where you've realised that a lot of the lessons here can also be applied to yourself? Because many people who read this book won't be businessmen. There'll be people who are reading it out of interest. Did you come away from your odyssey, as you call it, having learned certain things which will improve yourself as well?
That's a very self-reflective question, and you're absolutely right. All the four of us, we've worked very hard in our respective fields. Kevin as a consummate business person with Saatchi & Saatchi, and Mike Pratt, the Dean of the University of Waikato Management School, and Ed Weems, the Director of Executive Education. We've all worked very hard. But when you're confronted with, maybe that's the wrong word, when you work with and you spend time with these people, you realize just how inefficient you are and how much you can improve yourself. It's like, to use the basketball term, it's like a full court press. And you come away with incredible admiration for these people and some quiet reflection. This was really, really brought home to me by the foreword, which was put together by Sir Edmund Hillary, who was been an absolute childhood dream of mine to meet Sir Ed. And when I did meet with him, we talked about how we would write the foreword for the book. And what he did is he took the theory and personalized it in terms of his own personal challenges. and it enable you to realise just how outstanding Sir Edmund was at the individual level, because the book was written about organisation, not particularly individuals. But yes, it does apply to individuals too.
Excellent. So plenty to read about in here, and I'm sure a lot of people will do. It's called Peak Performance. Useful if you're a businessman, by the sounds useful if you're not, and wonderful to talk to you about it. Clive Gilson, thanks for joining us on the programme.
Thanks, Lee.